Oh, great.
There's something happening here, but what it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there, telling me I got to beware. I think it's time we stop, children. What's that sound? Everybody, look what's going down.
Salutations, good morning, and welcome, New Haven, Connecticut, the nation, and the world. This is your host, Jesse Turner, and you're listening to the Truth to Power Hour on 103.5 WNHH, New Haven, Connecticut. And I've got a great guest for us today, and it's just going to be a wonderful, wonderful show, an informative show. How we normally start. Oh, I forgot to say thank you to New Haven Independent for giving us this time on the air. So sorry, thank you, and thank you, Harry, for being an excellent engineer. So what I'm going to do is, Dr. Burrell, what we normally do over here is I say, introduce yourself to our listeners and our viewers, and give us a little bit of your passion. And I try to remind us, because we're academics. I'm an academic. I'm saying this first one is, let's just keep it to like 2 minutes, because we're going to have 58 minutes to talk about all this stuff. So we don't have to tell it all then. But Dr. Burrell, can you tell us who you are?
Oh, Jesse, thanks for having me here, Dr. Turner. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Harry. Thank you, New Haven. What a pleasure it is to be here. So my name is John Burrill. I am currently the Dean of the School of Education at Central Connecticut State University. Just this July 1st, I became a proud Blue Devil after 31 years in the K-12 Connecticut education system. I started out in the Milford Public Schools as a teacher, and was also lucky enough to be an athletics coach at the local high school there. Shout out to the Foreign Lions. And in addition to that, I pursued graduate work, receiving my administrative degree, got into being an assistant principal, and then had the good fortune of being in the Milford Public Schools, a large enough school district where my talents were recognized and I had opportunities to learn and grow, and was able to serve not only as a teacher and a coach and an assistant principal. I actually had the unique opportunity to be a principal of an elementary school, one of the middle schools, and also at Foreign High School. So I really was able to see the trifecta in the development of kids in the K-12 continuum. In addition to that, during that time, I was an adjunct professor at Southern Connecticut State University, my alma mater, where I was able to teach curriculum courses and leadership courses at the graduate level. After that, pursued my doctoral work at Northeastern University in organizational leadership. From there, became a superintendent of schools of the Bethany Public School System, which is one of the suburbs of New Haven that feeds into the Amity school system. And after a few years in that role, took on the role of the Brookfield Public School Superintendent for the past 10 years. And we did some great things there. We built a brand new elementary school, consolidated the schools, did a lot with financial and regulatory control and curriculum work. So just really proud of a great 31-year experience there, and excited to start here at Central Connecticut this summer into this fall semester.
All right, excellent, excellent. And I was part of that search committee. So
Yes.
we began with near 70 candidates, and we kept dwindling them down, and your name kept being in the list that kept going down and down until we had our final 3. And of course, you became the dean of the oldest school of education in Connecticut and the 6th oldest school of education in the nation.
Incredible.
You are part of a 175-year tradition of education. So, it's glad to have that. I've done a lot of research because, one, I was on that search committee, and you were unique. And then that's why I'm so excited to have you on the show, because maybe some people right now might have looked at yesterday's Hartford Current saying the test scores are lower than they've ever been before. And actually, no district, no state in the nation had any increases in their 2019 test scores, the national assessment. and actually many of them had drops, including Connecticut. But anyway, but a lot of people would get into that and then get into a crisis mode. But something that before I get to the first question, people, you got to read this book. This is not the normal. This is leading from the core. And we're going to find out what the core is. Not yet, John. I've got that one written down. It's immediately inspired teacher belief, enhancing school culture, because the first response to a news headline like that usually becomes more mandates, more focus on higher stakes testing, and not on building, improving, and motivating the morale of teachers. And today, we're going to talk about a recipe for not only recruiting new teachers, but how do you keep the ones that are in there? So I'm excited about that piece. You're different. On next Tuesday, I will be up in the Massachusetts legislature testifying just about they're ready to launch a new mandate for literacy in the state, legislative mandate. And I know it's going to take millions and millions of dollars, but no one's looking at they're losing librarians, they're losing literacy specialists, they're losing special education teachers. We're going to spend money on mandates and not on that. So I know you get that stuff. So one of the things, I want to know, what are the first things you're going to focus on? And you're stepping into this leadership role. You've been a successful dean, you've been a successful principal, vice principal, teacher, and I think coach as well. So, these you have these components. But now you really stepped into the fire in many ways in terms of this role. So what are the things that you're going to focus on? How is your leadership different? I think that's the first question I like to ask.
Sure.
Because as I've been reading about you and studying you, and I think you sent me, I feel like I had to read a dissertation, 10 dissertations in the materials to studying about you. But you're different. So tell us about what's different about your leadership and what will you bring to a school of education. And mind you, public, I think you should know, Central Connecticut School of Education, 1849 was a school of education, changed to professional studies and all, but we're back to the core, the beginning. And you're the first dean of the new school of education at Central. So anyway, I'm sorry. Let's get back to that basic that I said. What about your leadership? What are you going to bring?
Well, I got to tell you, first of all, I love the energy. I'm all fired up now, Jesse. You got me riled up and ready to rally. I got to tell you, it is, first of all, thanks again for having me on the show. I think, you gave that beautiful introduction in terms of, my experience and this kind of a thing. While I bring a lot of experience and there's some unique things in my background, a lot of what we need to think about in leadership is fit. And I think you just said it, the new school of education. My resume, spending the last 13 years as a superintendent of school, before that as a principal of all three levels, having been a graduate school professor, adjunct professor, all these pieces, a teacher, a coach, 31 years of experience, I'm able to bring to our new school of education. And one of the things I love the most in this profession, and I think all of us who are successful in it love the most, is working with students. And I am just thrilled that I have the opportunity, having worked with K-12, pre-K-12 students, that now I get to work in helping prepare the next generation of teachers and graduate student teachers who want to become the next generation of school and district leaders. I mean, who's got it better than me? And so I bring all my experience, practical experience, scholarly experience, to the table, and I could directly work with our faculty here and all of our undergrad and graduate students. The real, I think one of the unique things I also bring is my connection in Connecticut for over 3 decades. I can literally, and already have, I have my secret email list of all the superintendents. I've already sent out letters. we're Central Connecticut. We are here. I am here. What can we do to support you? What do you need in your school district? What kind of programs and innovation can we bring to support what you're doing with your students, especially kind of middle to high school in terms of preparing and exciting kids to want to go into the teaching profession in the first place? So that's working on the national and state teacher shortage is really the first order of business. A big part of that is the connection with the pre-K-12 superintendent group and principals, and certainly the teachers union. I'm connected here with one of our Dean Advisory Board members is the president of the CEA, Kate Diaz. So we really want to, this is a team effort, bringing this whole state community together in a real effort. Besides that is we want to not only stem the teacher shortage, so we need to get kids excited about the profession, teachers excited about becoming school leaders. We've also really got to think about when we get these students into school, whether they're graduate or undergraduate, we have to have an ecosystem of support around them to make sure we retain them here, we support them, because it is a rigorous program. Undergraduate and graduate, and we want to make sure our students succeed and meet with success as they matriculate through. So I think if we put those pieces together, we're really going to be in a good place.
Perfect. And so it brings us to the perfect place, because as we go on, I'm sure you're going to help us understand how we inspire and how we cultivate a collaborative community. One of the things that attracted me to looking at you, and I'll pull up candidates for the Dean when I was on the search committee, was I think you might have been the only one that talked about vision. So that's one. So I want to ask you about your book, because your book, Leading from the Core, when I read it, it's not just for educators. Could you tell us a little bit about what's the message of the book? What's the purpose? And that would be great.
Well, I think the to give a little genesis, a little pre-work before the message of the book is so people know the book is a scholarly work. It is based off of my dissertation work that I did as a culmination project for Northeastern. And from there, I studied a principle. I was able to find a principle, and I didn't know what the outcomes would be of the study. I wanted to do a case study on a principle of what were the things they did, their behavior that influenced teachers on their confidence level, their efficacy level in terms of their confidence in what they can do to impact change and impact students' lives in the learning progressions in the classroom. And so ultimately, long story short, it resulted in a beautiful dissertation. And from there, I've sat on it for a couple of years. And now more than ever, with what we see with teacher burnout and some of the concerns with the shortage of people going into educational leadership, and certainly the teacher shortage, and my arrival to campus, knowing over the last year we've been working with you through the lengthy interview process, and certainly it was a long one, rigorous. I had been thinking about, what was my legacy going to be, and how can I really impact people and get the word out about the great findings that came out of that study, that case study from back in 2018. And so I wrote Leading from the Core, really because the core is the core of instruction. If we want to move the needle, you went right to the newspaper and talked about those NAEP scores. If we're going to move the needle at all, we need to be doing things at the granular classroom level with students and with our teachers. They're the pros. They're on the front lines. They're shoulder to shoulder with one another. They're shoulder to shoulder with their school administrators. And of course, they're with parents and students all the time. That's the community we need to impact, and we need to empower them. And sometimes we think about the word empower, and I think about we really need to, if we're going to have them be responsible for student achievement, for example, at the building level, which makes sense, they're responsible for it, we need to give school principals and teachers the authority to be decision makers. And a big part of the book talks about federal and state mandates that are expensive. They produce a lot of anxiety, a lot of overhead, a lot of paperwork, and they don't work. And we've been doing this my entire career, over 30 years. And what really works is that getting on that granular level with teachers and principals. And at the end of the day, 3 real big truths came out of the study, and they are communication, collaboration, and connection in terms of how a principal could set the ecosystem and the culture of the school up with his or her faculty. And I know we'll dive a little deeper into some of those details.
No, no, no. Those are excellent. I'll just start with a quick quote from the book, so you can see I did my study.
Thank you. I appreciate you engaging.
Yes, yes, and you're talking about the credibility of shared work at this point. But really, you say, despite the rising tide of accountability measures in public schools, this principle never defaulted to the rote test prep or compliance focused strategies. And that gets that piece, that the connections. One of the things that I'm looking at as I read the book and as I've followed you is that you're a good listener. And in medicine, you can't approve a new medicine unless you talk to the patient, the caregiver, the family. Those three components, no medicine, no intervention, can be approved. And that's why you have those long sheets that come out of like with the things like you can get dizzy. There's no test for dizziness. There's no test for you're going to get sleepy. But what happens is in medicine, you have to talk to these people. So this idea of listening, and that's what I've found really refreshing, because in your book, you do mention some of the quantitative data, but you really focus on the case study, means that you talk to the principals, not only the principal, you talk to a core group of teachers. I want to know how listening will play a role in your leadership at Central Connecticut State University.
Oh, Jesse, it's the first thing you do. So during the interview process, as you will recall, and even hearing from different people prior to the faculty coming back after the summer to kind of have the opening faculty meeting, I had my associate dean said, some of the professors, they really want to hear your vision and they want to know, kind of your priorities. And I get that. And I have to articulate some of those things I'm envisioning, like we already started to talk about, in those priorities that I have to engage in. But notice what I just said, I, me. That's not what this is about. This is an organization of people and who have experience, who have a history here, who have incredible expertise. I mean, our faculty are scholars. And so I need to listen to them. And to that end, while I share areas of priority that are, I think, most would agree upon, and a greater vision for all of us working to be our best selves, and stem this teacher shortage and get people excited and inspired about education and the prospects of hope and prosperity and the American dream. We got to step back, and we're starting actually in 2 weeks our strategic planning process. And so that is the key. What do we do there? We'll be designing a survey that goes out to all of the faculty, the core group or steering committee, if you will, of 10 to 12 esteemed faculty who volunteered to be a part of the planning process. We're going to take a look at things. We're going to survey folks. We're going to talk to people, and we're going to listen to them because they represent each of our departments. And boy, when you do that, you start to coalesce around trust and teamwork, and you also really generate high quality ideas. Not only new from somebody who's from the outside like myself, but people who are here and have a history of how things have worked and other ideas. And certainly we have faculty who have been all over the country and all over the world. I've been all over K-12, which is, I'm very unique in this school bringing that. So we bring all these experts and experiences together, and man, we're hoping to stir it up and really come out with a nice focused product of 5 key priorities and an action plan for each that we can work on over the next 5 years.
So an action plan. So it reminds me of the last show we had with former dean of the University of Kentucky, Julian Velasquez Healy, who writes about inequity in schools all the time. But when Julian was the dean of that school, I interviewed him on the radio, and we called it the Kentucky Bluegrass Miracle, because he had improved after COVID, because it's right after COVID. Somehow in 3 years' time, they just blew the numbers of recruitment of new students into their school of education and their graduate programs at like greater numbers than before COVID. And Julian had a concept, you're different, but you're in some ways you have it. You're similar in the same that Julian listened well, and the first thing he did was he would talk to students who wanted to be teachers. And I know I've told you this before. He would say to those prospective education teachers when they're freshmen, he loved grabbing them right at the open house and say, "Any of you want to be teachers?" And he'd ask them, "Well, how many of you want to be teachers? Because you're going to make a lot of money." Of course, no one raises their hand. He was cognizant of the students today see a very different discipline, the situation in schools than when you and I were in school. But he would ask them, "How many of you think that teaching is going to be easy?" And no one would raise their hand. So Julian would say, "Well, what was the mission? What was the vision?" So when I hear you talking about strategic goals and strategic plans, I hear you talking about a new vision. Could you, what is that vision? What would it look like? How do those principles, connect? But I'd like to know your vision, like in there. I do have, your PowerPoint slides from when you talked to our new faculty on the welcome. And I thought it was interesting because while they may have asked you questions, you had some aspiration questions for them. And you said, it's May 10th. So for the school year, that's the end of the school year. After the
June, right? Yeah, first school year.
It's been a great year. Describe why. When you visualize the positive impact of your work, whose faces and scenarios do you say? But an inspiring word or phrase that is a reminder of what's important. So for me, like Julian Vasquez, I'm the vision person. I say you have to have a vision. You have to have a mission. Sorry, and you need to have like strategic goals. So so tell us about this vision that you're. And I know it's for you. It's bottom up.
It really is.
Most deans want to just do it top down, and they come in and say, "This is my vision. Get behind it or get out the door." So
I've learned, Jesse, over the years, as a school leader, district leader, organizational leader, someone who's been in public service for a very long time. So you work with elected officials as well. So you're there on thinking about civics and input from the entire community and all of that. So I really am a bottoms up person and a listener in terms of that. And I'm reminded of Hall of Fame, 3-time Super Bowl champion running back, Emmitt Smith from the Dallas Cowboys. Although I am a Giants fan, I'm a local guy here. I'm a Giants fan. He always said, and I don't know where he got this, but boy, did I love it. He talked about it in one of those NFL stories about what he teaches his kids. It's a dream until it's written down. And so whatever it is, it's a dream until it's written down. And I raised my sons actually that way. You have to write down whatever it is that you want to achieve or that you're envisioning, and then build those goals to support that kind of backwards design. What do I need to do to accomplish that? And keep it to 5 or less, because if you have more than 5 goals, you probably have no goals, because you can't concentrate on the key things you need to concentrate on. I think at the end of the day is a vibrant school of education where our students are engaged with our professors in meaningful discourse about teaching and learning every single day, where our students are engaged in actual field work, activity out in the school communities, and of course, ultimately, their crescendo is that beautiful student. You hope is their beautiful student teaching experience, where they are hands-on from at least sophomore year on. But even sometimes we have opportunities for our early students to get out there and see what's going on. I have this vision to make education almost and central, certainly. The School of Education, prestigious in the kind of students we prepare, the kind of place, the learning environment it is, but also accessible, ensuring that students can afford to get in here, that we don't overcomplicate the application process, and where they are supported. We talked about that ecosystem, that where they are supported they feel like they belong and they're engaged the entire time they're here. We're seeing it already. Like we did at the high school in my last school district, we had a Future Teachers of America club. Here we have our Future Educators Club. They're working again, like I said, we're in with the Connecticut Education Association. They're very involved and support us in that. And our professors are active. And even my dean's office staff, who are not not technically considered faculty, they're running some of these clubs with the students. I mean, we have everybody already engaged. Now, I can't take full credit for that. I've been here 2.5 months. There's a lot of energy and great people here, but I want to foster that and really let everybody know. And this goes back to that the presentation you're referencing a little bit. It really is important, kind of as we develop a vision, is to think personally for ourselves. There isn't one end game. The journey and the process has to be part of the joy. You have your end game, your dream, your goal, whatever you want to get to, but you have to enjoy that process, and that process is becoming your best self. How can I do a little bit better today? Is there something I can read? Is there some service I can provide? Can I be nicer to somebody? How could I be more focused on my physical and mental health? Whatever it might be, what am I going to learn that's new? What am I going to contribute? You have to be working to be your best self. That gives us purpose, right? And so we talked about being inspired by vision and grounded in purpose. And so I'm going on and on here. There's a lot of great things going on. I hope it's okay for you.
It's fine. It's fine. I find this time as being very unique. When I mentioned the test scores, what I didn't mention were they're the lowest they've been since 2002, and that was before No Child Left Behind, before Race to the Top. The scores were higher then.
Before the Common Core?
Yeah, before the Common Core, before we spent $3 trillion
right
on mandates and modifications.
Right.
And I've dug into some of that data, and it's not for this show, but one of the shows we did was the loss of school librarians and certified librarians, and even the closing of librarians, particularly in urban schools in Connecticut. You're at Central, so you're going to be connected to New Britain and several urban districts.
Right.
And when I looked at the data since 2002, urban public schools are down to half of the library staff that they had, and that kind of stuff. But I mean, you're when I'm listening to your work, you understand that if we're going to reach, you talked about an ecosystem of support for students at the campus, but also as experience as a school leader in a district, you also knew that. And in your book, you mentioned several times about putting students first over there, and when it's different as a dean now. Your students are, yes, your graduate students, your undergraduate students, but also our students are still those in the school. So I'm thinking about this idea that how do we inspire? And I think you've got it. You've given us this vision, building this vision. It's going to be collaborative. We're going to make connections. We're going to have purpose. And I remember when I came to Connecticut, I've been here, I think a little less than 30 years now. So when I came here, I was really in love with strategic school profiles, which at the end of them not only had what your test scores were, but also had things that the school were proud of. Maybe it's we have Rotary clubs. Maybe we have expanded our library and all that stuff. But I like that. But I'm trying to get back to that. When you talk about core truths, they're not the Common Core. So maybe you can share how this core can inspire vision and purpose. It's complicated, but I think that's a question that the world would like to hear, because you're different, okay? And I'm going to call you John, and you're going to call me Jesse now. We're beyond all the. So, John, tell us about how that core that you talk about leading from inspires vision and purpose.
Yeah, and I think when we get outside of ourselves and lead, and not necessarily have to lead a group of people, but lead our own lives, start thinking about that dream for ourselves, right? Becoming our best selves, leading conversations at the dinner table, leading conversations with our friends, leading your family, whatever it might be. You start to think about living with purpose. And I hope I model that for the folks that I'm positionally charged with leading. And so you want to think about focusing on doing good, not necessarily feeling good or what's in it for me. And once you flip that switch to doing good and serving others, frankly, now that I've learned that secret, it's like the most selfish thing you could do, because the gift you get back from the satisfaction of serving others, contributing, doing well by people, developing people, giving them the opportunity to thrive, patting people on the back and giving them that tap and saying, hey, I think, you should think about this. You'll be really good at this. I've noticed this about you. The kind word, whatever it is, you get that back probably tenfold. So it's just modeling that, demonstrating that, and expressing that, kind of living with purpose, I think is really something that has inspired me and just been reinforced by the fact that acting that way, behaving that way, has contributed to a wonderful life. When we think about inspiring people to go into education, into teaching, one of the concrete things I talk to the students who just got here as freshmen, but also to the seniors who are starting their student teaching. We had 2 different kind of dean welcome meetings to kick off the year a couple of weeks ago. And I said, I congratulated them. And I think, congratulations, especially the freshmen. Congratulations for what? I said, you have chosen an incredible career. When you're a coach or a teacher or a leader of any kind, and you're connecting with people all the time, you leave a piece of yourself with them forever. The gift you're giving of yourself then has this ripple effect. And I asked them to do a very simple exercise. Think of your favorite teacher. We've all done these kind of things. Or the most impactful coach or person in your life, whatever it might be. And immediately that conjures up these really fond memories for people. And you actually see people smile as they start to think about that favorite teacher from 3rd grade or whatever it might be. And then we stop and I say, you don't have to share. Just keep thinking about that person. Realize, when was the last time you interacted with that person? And for many people, it's 12 years ago. It's 15, 20, 30 years ago. That person's living with you your entire life, whatever lessons they taught you. And you're sharing those lessons with others. So it's amazing what you can do in this profession. So I talk about the opportunity to serve, the impact you can have, but I give concrete things. You can have a really nice salary. You can have a great health benefit package. Educators still are, in many, especially here in Connecticut, are in a defined pension program. You have opportunity to travel and learn more in the summer because school isn't in session. There's just a lot of great things about it. So why not talk about that as well? There's a lot of fringe benefits to it as well. And I think we're going to turn the tide here. The youth are starting to think about teaching again, and they're looking for greater purpose. Especially as we talked about before the show, some of the things that are going on in society. I think they're looking for depth and purpose more than the almighty dollar, for sure.
More than the almighty dollar. So it's that component of purpose. And when we look at professions and we ask people, who are the people or the professions that impacted your life? Teaching is always in the top 3. We always have family, we always have clergy, and teachers over there. So I always remind my teachers we're in a noble profession, an honorable profession. And I'm not certain that the headlines often capture that, but if I can tell you that you're entering into an honorable and noble profession, then that will help recruit you. It will help the teachers in the class, because I want to go to this piece over here. I'm looking at it in your book. You always talk about respect, the teamwork. And
Yes.
you talk about those core values of communication, collaboration, and connection. This is how, because in your book is really a book that's a secret to say, hey, look beyond the numbers and let me tell you how I can help you improve climate and the culture at your school. That's how you retain the teachers that are in your school. We know that. If I can do that in a school of ed, Well, my God, they're going to go out in schools and have a purpose. They're going to come back to us for multiple graduate degrees, and they'll probably end up being the dean or the superintendent one day as well. And that's that. So, those core truths that you talk about, the communication, the collaboration, and the connection. That is, I imagine, this is the core to improving climate and culture. Is that right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And remember, we go into our doctoral our studies. When you're going into a study, you can't go in with preconceived notions. You really have to work hard to put your bias aside. And having a lot of years of principal experience at that point in my career, going through the doctoral program at Northeastern and setting up this study, I had to put my preconceived notions of what I thought was best way to go about things as a practitioner. Instead, I had to go in as objective as I could. And studying this principal, observing this principal, she's amazing, by the way. And I didn't know how amazing she was going in. There was some randomness, of course, in selecting who you're going to study. Sitting with the teachers, talking to them on multiple occasions. And really, we used a technology back then that recorded everything. And so we've got exact quotes that are pulled, that are in the book, are there, of what really made a difference for the teacher in terms of feeling that confidence level, that sense of belonging, that they wanted to go and work and do those things. And that secret sauce, if you will, that recipe is going to help retain and recruit. This principal had teachers within the school district trying to transfer to her school. And so that came up during the study. I'm saying, wow, this person's got something special going on here. And when all that work was done and we collated everything and put everything together, these themes emerged, of the large themes of communication, collaboration, and connection. And and I don't want to go too deep here. It's in the book, but it gets a little heady here into the weeds. But in Carl Weick's framework of a loosely coupled organization, we don't have supervisors in schools watching every move. A principal isn't watching every move a teacher makes during the school day. For most of the day, the teacher can close their door and they're on their own with their students. So what's the glue that couples them and brings them together? It's a sense of purpose and mission. Right? And what are we doing to make sure our students are moving forward? And to enhance that purpose, the principal's behavior, we found, was around communication, collaboration, and connection. We talk about communication, we're really talking about connecting dots. With this external accountability, there's a lot of pressure on teachers and educators. And so how does the principal package the things you have to do with the things we know we need to do and make sense of that, and also create a sense of urgency? Not pressure urgency where we're running around frantic, but a sense of real focus, purpose, and priority. So how do you do that? And so there's examples in the book of how the principal went about that. And that's under the big umbrella of the truth of communication. The truth of collaboration is a principal who's an instructional leader and builds in time for collaboration, but is there shoulder to shoulder helping collaborate, looking at student data, going through the anecdotal information on a student and putting together an intervention plan to support, or a new focus on math priorities, or whatever it might be. The principal doesn't just assign everybody and say, hey, reading teacher, you're in charge, work with the classroom teachers at grade level 4 and just get it done. They're actually there as much as they can be, given the balance of their other responsibilities. And then the last truth is connection. And this one is the key to everything. And I say it at the beginning of the book and we end with it in the book, is it's all about people. We've got to build relationships with people. Now, Jesse, someday you and I might have a disagreement. Fine, that's okay. We have a sense of purpose and shared mission, and we might disagree on how we're going to get to where we need to get, but we're going to respect each other and work closely together. And I'm going to help you find a way to wherever it is we need to get together, and I know you'll do that for me. We call that reciprocal accountability, and that's kind of underneath collaboration and connection. So, when I have your back, I know you're going to have my back, and we're a team. And so she cultivated this sense, and she didn't do it on day one when she became the principal. There's a story in there. It took her a while to get her feet under her. What was beautiful about this, and again, just the way I just told the story, it rolled out. This is a lot of I was able to self-examine my leadership style as a school principal. And at the time, I was still a superintendent. As a superintendent, what was I doing to demonstrate, model, create the conditions for strong communication, collaboration, connection, which enters into supporting teacher efficacy, teacher belief in themselves, in their colleagues, in their leader, and in the organization. So that's a long answer, but man, it's a lot of good stuff. It's a lot of good stuff there.
It's a long answer that makes sense after 2.5 decades of expensive,
Right.
top down, and somewhere, we have to start I look at the data. I'm a data junkie.
Sure.
And haven't seen success in these things, but I have seen success. That's why I love the idea of what do we call it? The data that qualitative data. That's that data we talk. We actually talk with people. We get down and we say, well, how do you feel? How do you hold on? How long do you see yourself? Like when you asked your questions to the new faculty, you said, where are you going to be? What are you going to say on May 10th? And this concept. So I think this is unique. I think it's unique right now. I think it's unique, not only in a pre-K 12 month. I think it's extremely unique in higher ed, at a school of education. This idea, when I look at it, when we've had some discussions, not much, and I have read the book, but I see it as being a way to not only inspire, but it has a way of stopping that teacher shortage gap, that
Right.
shortage, and not only by, you're not chasing just the new ones. You're saying, how do we hold on the old ones? And there's a piece you talk about, how do we inspire teachers from the head and the heart. So I think that's important, because we often have in this age of quick fixes and silver bullets, and none of it is easy.
No.
Education is complicated, it's difficult, but it's probably one of the most important things we do. But how do you lead with the head and the heart?
Right.
And could you tell us about that?
Well,
I see you have a
you're
lot
getting
of
me
heart.
you're getting me thinking about the title, right? The subtitle of the book, because there aren't quick fixes, but I do use the word immediately inspire teacher belief and enhance school culture. And the reason I use immediately, you said it yourself. I think it was before the show, or maybe it was during the show. You've talked to some. You're a professor emeritus. You just retired from 25 plus years here at Central. And so you have connections here with our faculty. The people I'm working with every day have become friends of yours. So you're going to have these natural conversations. And what you were sharing with me is they really came out of kind of the opening meeting and the interactions with me, understanding and feeling energized, at least. I don't know about inspired yet, but certainly energized that at least in first impression, early impressions, this is a guy who's listening to us, who's got vision and wants to do this as a team. And I think that's the immediate part. You never get a second chance to make a first impression. And when you're with the people who are looking to you to lead, you can't do things to immediately break trust. Most people are already going to look at you a little suspicious. You're new. They don't know who you are. What's this new guy going to do? That's what they're thinking. What's he thinking? Can I trust him? Will he be here for the long haul? All those kind of things. And so, and if I were sitting in their chair, I'd think the same thing about a new leader. So it's human nature. So we have to have this respect and appreciation for individual worth and individual perspective. And then the reality of we do need to come together as a team in an organization, on shared purpose and shared goals. But I immediately said, right from my opening letters, even before I started, we've got to start a process where we're going to be listening to one another in terms of strategic planning and visioning. So that's a message I've drilled from, interviewing with you and the team back in February, all the way, through introduction here. So I don't know if I hit exactly.
You got it. There's a component that I've always thought about, and having been, I spent 17 years in public schools and
Yeah.
25 years in higher ed, but always, I always thought about the purpose. And, so what is the purpose? And I'm not saying this isn't your question.
Yeah. Yeah.
The purpose of what I was doing. And it got to me. We had a little discussion at the beginning. I talked about civics, and I'm looking at civics after we saw Charlie Kirk's assassination. We know it's a 22-year-old young
Awful.
man from Utah. It's not only him; it's Governor Shapiro of Pennsylvania, who on celebrating a Jewish night, family night, and someone comes into the house and firebombs them and tries to kill them, and they have to flee. The governor, and we've seen this. We've seen Minnesota legislators killed in
Hmm.
their own home. We've seen was the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi's husband, being beaten by somebody over there. And so when I'm looking at that purpose, I'm and I think young people are looking for the purpose, and the purpose isn't will you get a good job? What will your test score be? As a matter of fact, if you asked me that as soon as I took the test, I felt like I did poorly in it. Even if I did well, it never motivated me. But what did motivate me was history teachers who taught me about the Constitution, government, taught me about what it means, my responsibility, because that was my favorite history teacher was Mr. Slewinski. He said, "Hey,
Hmm.
you got a role in this democracy. You're
Hmm.
responsible to keep it going." So, is there what will be the role of civics in the work that you do there? I mean, you've got a great history department at Central. You
Hmm.
do. I work with those teachers. But will there be a role for civics? How do we prevent a
Yeah.
22-year-old man from assassinating a 31-year-old father of two? How do we stop people from throwing firebombs into people's homes? So I think this is what inspired me to become
Yeah.
a teacher, the purpose. So could you maybe tell us
Yeah,
about
I mean,
civics?
I am way. I've been around too long, and I'm too wise, and I'm going to come at this with a lot of humility. I certainly don't have the answer for that. That's for sure. But what I can comment on is certainly like you. I had in my especially my high school experience, but I had some incredible middle school teachers as well. That we learned a lot about history and civics, and it was good for us. And we do have a role. And I think I had some inspiration growing up in terms of I love I share this often about purpose. My mom had a big poster with magnets on the refrigerator that said, "A woman's place is in the House and in the Senate." So she made sure we knew our place and how we were going to treat women, and how we were all very important. I think people at the end of the day are seeking the fact that they want to be important. They want to feel listened to and heard. Most seek significance, and if people feel alienated, ostracized, are not pulled out of whatever funk they might be in, trapped with their video games and engrossed in social media, and now it's so engaging with the headsets and the virtual reality and augmented reality, they really do lose sight of humanity, and I think they lose sight of or never had sight of a vision and a purpose for themselves. I think, to your point, we need to let young people know they do have a role in this. They're incredibly important. They're part of the solution. And the older generation isn't the enemy of them. We're all in this together. It doesn't matter. And we have to come together. I've got my pin on. I mean, we have to come together as Americans and love this greatest nation on earth and think for one another and start pulling for one another. It just boggles my mind that someone gets to that point, where they would plan such a, think it up in the first place, then plan it, and then ultimately take action on a plan like that. We've got to find a higher purpose and deeper learning and that sense of mission in that core, right? For for our young people and for adults too, because it isn't always, you mentioned the one in the assassination of the people, the legislators at their house in Minnesota. That was an adult. We just can't have this. It's just so horrible. And, I think what Charlie was doing was trying to do exactly that in terms of civics and engaging people, whether you agreed with him or not. That doesn't matter. He was always civil to people and kind, and really tried to engage. From what I know,
And no one deserves to be murdered
of course not.
in their political beliefs. That's what free speech is about in the nation. Doesn't mean I have to agree with your free speech, but I have to defend that right to say what was.
I mean, I know you, Jesse. I haven't missed an election yet. Since I got my voting ability to vote when I turned 18. Those who came before us, who put their lives on the line, we have to defend free speech. We have to get out and vote. We have to be engaged in our country, and we have to contribute. Again, do good rather than worrying about feeling good and instant gratification. You start doing good, man, it comes back to you tenfold. And that living with purpose is really important. And so, I appreciate the venue to have this conversation with you today. I definitely will share it with my faculty. They'll get to know me a little better because I haven't engaged with all of them in some of this deep conversation. It's really important for us to be talking about this.
It's the major. And in my years as a teacher educator, it was always about reminding them that you have a greater purpose, and that purpose is to preserve our democracy, to educate citizens, not who score the highest on tests or who make the most money. Our successful citizens will be active participants in preserving that democracy, that kind of concept. So that's why I was asking that piece over there, thinking about that, because I know that if I was talking to we do a secondary literacy course, 440, was one of my favorite courses at Central. Lots of faculty are not excited about working with undergrads, but I love that group, and we would talk about that all the time. That what's the purpose of education? What's the purpose of being a teacher? There's more glamorous stuff. Maybe I always wanted to be. I wanted to be the next Mickey Mantle and Roger Maris. I thought I could do that. Reggie Jackson, Mr. Octo. Now you get the idea that I'm a Yankee fan.
Yeah, of course, me too.
Yeah, there you go. So but that concept, and I know it's important, and I think it's important. So I've had since I think 1992. I think I've had over 16 deans in different roles. I worked at a community college. I did all of these things, and at Easton, at Central, a lot of deans in that thing. Very few of them reminded faculty of the purpose of education. So I see that in this communication, collaboration, and connectivity. That's what connects us.
Right.
That's why my friend Julian Vasquez, he always says, remind them of the mission. What was their vision? Why they want to do this in the first place? So
right.
That's a good place. So think about that concept, how civics and how teachers can inspire young learners, to be to just be better, our better angels, that concept. And I see that when we do that, that's when I feel good. I don't feel good because I win an argument today. I feel good when I sit down and I say, you know what? I think I did good today.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about that, connecting the purpose to inspiring new teachers and retaining the old ones. And I think you did that. You have a career. I've followed you. I've read your book. I was on that search committee, so I know your resume. That stuff. So I think you've done that. It's something that one of the reasons that I was excited that you were in that final pool. And we don't get to pick on that committee. It goes to the provost, goes to the president. They make the final decision. But really, in that, you were probably one of the few people who I saw that connect to this purpose. So can you tell us how purpose and your vision, because collaborative, building up from the ground up, what's the role of purpose in that, and how does it inspire new and old teachers?
Yeah, I think so. When you talk about purpose, you get people to reflect on what their purpose is and why, right? What's your why? We ask that question as well. Why are you doing this? Step back and think about it. Why are you doing this? And then what are those key things we're going to do together? For this organization, for our students. It gives you purpose, and you have to be clear on it. And I use a phrase, I don't know if you remember it from the book, Jesse, ruthless prioritization. I said it earlier, if you have more than 5 goals, you've got no goals. You've really got to be focused. What are we all about? And I think when you get that, that's right. I think the next step in there, we talked about the truths, right? Communication, collaboration, and connection. And there's a lot of detail under all of those. So, we're not going to get to it all in an hour. People need to read the book, that's for sure. But I use the acronym ACE a lot of times with things just to help, give me that number, 3 things people remember really. And so for this particular ACE example I give you is authenticity, commitment, and empathy. If you bring kind of that affect to your leadership style, you're authentic. I'm not going to try to, as the K-12 superintendent guy coming in, I'm not going to try to, act like I'm a dean. I even made a joke with the parents and the students at one of the orientations in early August. I said, I'm here, I'm approachable, I want to support you. I'm not going to have a straight stem pipe and patches on my elbows on my jacket and pretend I'm some collegiate dean. I'm going to be me, and I want you to be your best self and be you. And I think so. That's the authenticity part. I think commitment. People see it over time, but they need to see you're working hard, and they need to see you care, and that you're interested in learning about the history of the organization, of the school, of their experiences, and when you engage in those conversations, and then. I think empathetic, it's important. And I think this goes back to the civics conversation a little bit and how we've gotten so polarized is we've got to walk a mile in other people's moccasins. You've got to actually say, what is that person going through right now that's making them act this way, whatever it might be. They seem down. They're coming at me really strong. There's got the insecure about something. Am I coming across in a threatening way? If you have that empathetic ear, that's the listening piece again.
So
and
that's the piece.
Listening and viewing.
No problem. We're coming to an end in our time today, but we're going to be back together. I'd like to, you said the new dean at Southern in the School of Education.
Right.
I'd love to have both of you on.
We sat down and had lunch a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, I want you on. I want Tony Casper from New Britain on, and Evie Velasquez, who is the assistant superintendent,
right,
who has a good component about this. But we have other shows that will tell this story over time, and we'll watch it unfold. So I want to thank you.
Thank you.
Being our guest, I want to thank everyone for tuning in. We appreciate the time and the listening. I had a great time today with Dr. John Burrell. Yes, I did. It's exciting. So peace, love, and breathe. Hey,
thanks, Jesse.
Read this one.
There's something happening here, but what it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there, telling me I got to beware. I think it's time we stop, children. What's that sound? Everybody look what's going down.